Hi everyone, welcome back. This slide here is the slide from the previous video. So remember we were talking about optimizing operations to increase productivity, which then should increase competitiveness. And these are the four areas down the bottom there: facilities, location, design and layout, materials management, technology management, and quality management. And so today we're going to go through facilities. So first of all, we'll start off with location. Now, we've got to look at the design, and we'll look at that a little bit later. But first of all, the location. So looking at the premises, how well an organisation can manage the actual premises they have. So whether that be a factory or a shop front, whatever it is, how well they do that will determine how well they can satisfy their customers. Now, when we look at location, there's a few things that an operations manager needs to take into account. And it wouldn't just be the operations manager dealing with this. This would also be the CEO and the board of directors to approve this. But the operations manager is likely to have some input. And this would be part of strategic planning. So there's four main things that we're going to look at. And there's probably a million other things, but these are the four things that we can really focus on. First of all, how much space is available. Factories, if they're large, then obviously you need lots of space, and the problem with that is that there may not be infrastructure available in that space, so you need to take that into account as well, which we'll talk about in a second. So the first thing is space, so we'll put that in there. The second point is we need access to labour and raw materials. Now, mining companies have a bit of trouble with this because often they're mining in remote areas and people don't live there. So in order to overcome this, they may fly labour in, or you hear of mining towns booming, so the housing prices booming. That's where the town, essentially, there's a new town set up, and new houses are built and the prices boom because there's an organisation that decides to mine, and therefore people need to live there. So there's ways of getting around it if there is no access to labour or raw materials, but essentially that's something that an organisation needs to take into account. So that's our second point. And our third point is the actual proximity to suppliers and customers. So similar to access to labour and raw materials, you need to have access to suppliers so that you can actually get your supplies, and you need to be able to have access to be able to sell to your customers. There's no point setting up in the Northern Territory if all your suppliers are in Victoria and you're selling all your products in Victoria. So you need to weigh up, do you set up and be close to your suppliers, or if not, what's the cost of actually getting your suppliers? So there's things that organisations have to weigh up when they're looking at location. The last point is essentially infrastructure. So I've got there electricity and water. You're looking at roads and things like that, but essentially it's infrastructure. Now, the government can help organisations out with this. If they see it's large and it's going to provide lots of employment, then they may help them with infrastructure. So they're essentially the four things that organisations need to take into account when they're looking at location. So we'll move on. And now we're looking at the design and layout. And there's three main layouts that we need that we're going to go through. But first of all, just think of if it's a factory or a service organisation, any work areas, any tools, any equipment, any machinery, toilets, any waiting areas, any staff rooms, anything like that, they need to be arranged and put into the appropriate location. Now, to do that, there's three main layouts that we use. Now, we know that space is limited, so how the work actually flows is really important to optimize your productivity. So we're going to go through three different types of layouts. There are more than these, and in your textbook it may refer to more than these, but these are the three that we're going to look at in this video. So the first is what we call the process layout. So this is where the equipment and work centres are arranged according to similarity of function. I've got examples there of a hospital and a bakery, and I'll show you an example of a hospital in a second. But essentially, this is where there's high variety. So it could be different product ranges. So you're not just doing one or two products and just trying to pump out as many as possible. You've actually, in your production, there's actually a high amounts of variety. And this kind of layout fits in well with that. So if we look at a hospital here, you can see there you've got the admin offices together, then you've got the cafe, you've got the wards over here, all right, some hospital beds, ICU down here. So all these things are similarity in functions. You don't have one emergency room over here and then one over here. They're all grouped together. So this helps keep the workflow, it helps it to flow appropriately, and that can be increase or help increase productivity. So that's the process layout. Similarity of function, it's good for high variety. That's the key, high variety. When we look at the next one, a product layout, this is where large volumes of goods. Now what happens is the product or the goods are moved from workstation to workstation in sequential order. So the best example is the assembly line. So it's really good for large volumes of goods. When you're trying to produce large amounts of a particular product, this is a great layout to use. So in the assembly line, the body of the car moves from one station to the next, and the worker or the machine, depending on what's in a particular station, just performs the same task over and over and over again. So this was a way that when cars were first built, you know, that they were built from scratch, and some cars still are, some elite cars still are, but you know, your Holdens and your Fords are built on an assembly line, and they're able, since the assembly line was produced, they were able to produce large quantities per day. So there's an example. You can see there car after car after car, and in this situation it's machines doing the work. In other situations it would be actual workers doing the work, but it just performs the same task over and over and over, and that is an assembly line. Our final layout is the fixed position layout, and this is where the product remains in one location and all the workers and all the machinery actually come to the product. So the reason for that is normally because of size. So the example there is a construction site. Some examples, there's construction of a building. Obviously it's not going to move around because it's too large, so all the workers and all the machines and materials actually come to it because of its size. So that's a fixed position layout. Similar when manufacturing a plane. That photo is probably hard to see, but what you can see is that it's quite large, and the same with a ship. So you can see the common theme there is the size of the product, because it's so large that it can't be moved around, and so all the workers and all the materials and machines, etc., need to actually come to the product. Now it's important to note that some products will use a mixture of these layouts, okay, but don't get too caught up. Just try and keep it simple, and you can explain each one of these layouts on their own. And so obviously the benefits: the process layout, high variety; product layout, high volume; and fixed position layout is low volume, clearly because of its size. You don't produce millions of high-rise buildings per day, but you can refer to it because of its size. So you wouldn't want to produce a washing machine, for example, with a fixed position layout. That you could argue a product layout, or you could argue a process layout for that. So you need to be able to look at a particular product and assign a way of optimizing operations in terms of layout. You need to be able to explain what that layout does and how it works, and you need to be able to justify why that's the most appropriate layout and how that will improve productivity. So just to recap, we look at facilities location. Some things to take into consideration are space, access to labour and materials, access to suppliers and customers, and obviously infrastructure like roads and water and electricity. And then our three facilities layouts. Process layout, where the work centres are arranged in similarity. Process layout, the product actually moves in sequential order. And fixed position layout, due to its size, workers and equipment move to the product. And remember, as always, for more videos, activities, questions, go to teachingbubble.com.